So hello and welcome, those of you who are watching this video, to another conversation here in our series on conversations about practical spirituality. My name is Mike Jenkins of the Hamblin Vision, and joining me today is Reverend Don MacGregor. Welcome, Don.
Hi. Hello. Hi. Nice to be here with you.
Thanks so much. Don is going to be giving a talk for us actually in March, and the date of that will be Tuesday, the 12th of March. And the title of that talk is, just a moment, the title of that talk is Science, Oneness and God.
Yeah.
And so Don's going to talk to us a little bit today about that. It's one of a number of talks that you give, isn't that right, Don, on this topic and others?
Yes.
We thought it would be great to just have a little chat to you about your work and what you're going to be talking about.
Yeah. Well, I suppose it stems from my own background. I started off as a science teacher. And so I taught science in a secondary school for 13 years. And during that time, I became kind of interested in spirituality and had a conversion experience, if you like, to Christianity. And I eventually went off for training as a priest. And then I've been in churches, large and small, for many years since. I'm retired now. But actually, before I got involved in Christianity, I studied quite a lot of other teachings, including the perennial wisdom, the ageless wisdom teachings. And as time's gone on, it's those that have come back to try and put them in context with my own science training and so on. And so in a way, I've been trying to make sense of my own journey. It's taken me a long time to do it, but hopefully I think I'm getting there. So I'm currently writing a series of books which try to make sense of my journey and how I see Christianity needing to expand into a more universal spirituality.
Yes, that's interesting. And it seems that sort of spiritual study or spiritual practice has kind of been going that way anyway, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That actually, in the years, I guess maybe the 50s and 60s, when Eastern teachers were traveling to America and the UK, and we became more interested in those teachings, that there was a sort of exchange, an exchange between East and West. More Buddhist teachers or Hindu Advaita teachings, Indian sages and swamis. And so I think that's interesting. And also probably certainly a number of our regular members and viewers will have read books by scientists, who have explored spiritual principles, but from a scientific point of view. And there does seem to be a growing consensus, particularly, when you start talking about quantum physics and some of the subatomic world, that some of those inexplicable principles can be explained with a spiritual viewpoint.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a member of the Scientific and Medical Network as well.
Oh yes.
And they are at the kind of leading edge of what we're talking about here, which is understanding that consciousness is the substrata of existence, if you like, and that everything actually stems from that whole idea of there being a kind of universal consciousness or universal mind, if you like. Yeah.
Yes.
And that's just come to the fore really in the last 20 years.
Yes.
Yeah. So many people are saying it.
So what would the scientists or the physicists say? What would they? So we in the spiritual world, we would perhaps understand consciousness to mean awareness or emptiness or Buddha mind or kind of pure potentiality, like a nothingness, but a very kind of conscious, alive nothingness, ready to be everything. How would physicists or scientists describe that?
Well, they really describe it in sort of terms of information that beyond or underneath the world of energy, which is what we exist in, this 3D world, which is all made up of energy, there's another level of information, and it's like the whole of the universe is a holographic projection from that informational domain, which underlies it, and that that is what is akin to our spiritual understanding of the God who from whom everything emanates.
Yes. So in a way that sort of explains or describes even concepts like omnipotence, or omnipresence,
Yes,
so that actually
yes,
it's everything and all things at once.
yes, yes. That it is this universal consciousness from which undergirds everything, I suppose, which
Mm.
everything contains in order to exist. Yeah, that's that sort of idea
Yes.
that's really coming forth from the scientists, and it stems from quantum physics
Mm.
um, and particular experiments in that. The wave particle duality, and
Yes.
it's the observer, the consciousness that brings it into being a particle from a kind of wave potential. Yeah,
Yes. Yes. Well, I've got a friend who, together with some others, we helped to host some monthly open mic nights for poetry and spoken word. He also was a high school teacher for
yeah.
probably about 30 years, a science teacher, actually, physics teacher, and
Mm.
he's fascinated by particle physics, and he wants to write a little script, kind of almost like a comedy script, really, about the concept of entanglement. And he was trying to
Yeah,
explain it to me the other day, and he was saying, this idea that you can separate, two particles that are linked really, really far apart, and the minute one changes, like the other responds. So this idea that they're just linked,
yeah.
infinitely,
And
no
it's
matter how.
instantaneous. It's far quicker than the speed of light, which
Yes.
normal physics says you can't exceed that
Which
speed of
doesn't make sense. Yes, apparently
light.
Einstein said, it just can't be. It can't be the case.
Yeah. Spooky action at a distance is what
Spooky
it's
action at a distance. Exactly. Yes. So that's interesting, because certainly some of the books that I've read over the years, the past 10 years, I suppose, there seem to have been a number of, particularly, particle physicists who eventually, you know, they come to a spiritual understanding, because it's the only way that they can be explained. That you know
Yeah,
that the world is so sort of, the world of particle physics is so, bizarre, kind of Lewis
yeah,
Carroll land, that eventually
yeah,
they adopt a more sort of spiritual understanding of it.
yeah. And it's interesting that the deeper the scientists are going into it, and the deeper we understand it from a spiritual point of view, the more it actually converges.
Yes.
So we're just using different terminology. Uh,
Yes. I
yeah.
agree. I agree. So tell us a little bit about this talk then, because I know you've got a number of different presentations that you do, and this particular one is looking at science, oneness, and God.
Yeah. Well, I'll start off looking at some of the science and what is coming up over the last really 50 years, I suppose,
Mm.
um, and pointing out really that this whole idea of consciousness is what's underlying the new science, and that it's kind of post-materialistic science, uh,
Mm.
which is trying to present a different framework for understanding it altogether.
Mm.
Um, and that there are many famous scientists who have done this exactly, really, for the last 100 years, right from back in Max Planck's days,
Right.
the turn of last century.
Mm.
Um, um, and they've been saying the same thing, really, that consciousness is what is behind everything. There's a kind of matrix of consciousness.
Yes.
And then I'm kind of linking that through into some of the spiritual teachings, and looking at, over the last 3,000 years, what's been said, who by, where,
Mm.
what the cultural context was, and so on. And then
Yes.
just seeing that it's actually just all coming together um, at this particular time. There is something about this particular time that's
Mm.
very key, I think, in all this. That humanity is approaching some kind of change, some kind of some call it an initiation, some call it a tipping point or whatever. But
Yes.
there's got to be some advance in human consciousness that drags us out of
Mm.
the not just the way in which we see the world at the moment. And it's like all the stuff that's coming up in the world at the moment is highlighting for us what we don't want.
Yes.
Whereas before, it would well probably have been accepted.
Yes.
That is just the way the world is. But now there's a change, and people are saying, "But we don't want it like this anymore. It's going to have to change. It's not right. There's a better way." But how long that's going to take, isn't it? Anyway.
I know, and I agree with you. I think a lot of our viewers would, that they sense that change is already here. Interesting, you talked about a tipping point. I remember listening to a teacher years ago, and I can't remember who it was, but that effectively they were saying, might have been Ken Wilber or somebody like that, talking about this idea of critical mass.
Yeah.
There are for centuries the monasteries and the convents and the sort of centers where people would meditate and be still, and that was fine for them. But actually, if there's going to be any kind of transformation of humanity, that the awareness of awareness, or awareness of that substrata of consciousness needs to happen in a critical mass of humans in order, like say, for that tip to happen, which is interesting. There's also a really good talk. I don't know if it's available, but it was around the time of the beginning of the pandemic, by Andrew Harvey. He's a very engaging speaker, and he was talking about this concept of transfiguration, that actually, when he, was basically, his viewpoint was that when humanity awoke on such a mass level, that it was possible that the human species wouldn't just transform, but would be transfigured.
Yeah.
Like the caterpillar doesn't bear any resemblance really to the butterfly, that kind of transformation.
Yeah. It's like, the whole caterpillar idea is that it goes into a pupa, and then somehow there's imaginal cells in the goo inside the pupa that develop into this amazing thing, the butterfly. And flies off in a different a different realm altogether. No longer
exactly. It's sort of staggering rebirth, really, like you say. So I think that many people will be interested to hear about.
I mean, I kind of, I've said it very briefly today, but really I go into a far more kind of detailed exposition of it, really, with it just leading to that idea that this is happening. Really, it's happening now, in its own slowly transfiguring way.
Yes, and there does seem to be a greater awareness of nature, of the earth, a greater understanding that we're not separate, in a way that I don't think was there so much, certainly not in the general population. I think that's what's interesting, that these concepts and this understanding does seem to be more and more in the general population than ever before.
It's no longer that there's the earth and there's us. We are the earth.
Yes.
We are part of it. We're part of the biosphere.
Yes, exactly. So anybody who's listening, and if you think this would be something for you, then please do go along to our website, and there are tickets available still. It's an event on Zoom, so we'll all be here together in a Zoom call, and book up. Don will be giving the talk on, as I say, on Tuesday the 12th of March, and the time is from 7 p.m. until about 8:30, and the talk will also be recorded. So if anyone books a ticket and can't come on the day, then there'll be a recording available, which we'll send out to everybody. And if people want to find out a bit more about you, Don, have you got a website? You've got a website, haven't you?
Yeah, it's just the usual www.donmacgregor.co.uk.
Nice and simple. That's great.
MAC for MacGregor.
MacGregor. And that's so that's www.donmacgregor.co.uk if you want to find out more about Don's work. You've written a book, haven't you, as well?
I've written 4 now.
Good God.
Yeah. Well, the first one, and just so happens I've got them here.
Well, let's see one of them.
That was the first one, Blue Sky God, which was about the evolution of science and Christianity. And then I've been writing a series of shorter ones, which are useful for group study. So the first one was Christianity expanding into universal spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
Second one was expanding scriptures, lost and found, looking at all the ones that have been found in recent years that give a whole different viewpoint, like the Gospel of Thomas.
Yes.
And then this one is about teasing out the difference between the Christ and Jesus, which is a bit controversial, but I just see it in a very different light, that Christ is a kind of universal principle.
Yes.
That kind of inhabited Jesus for a while. Yeah.
I think many of our members and regular people who come to our events regularly would take that viewpoint too.
Yeah.
That Christ consciousness is essentially what we tap into. When we experience oneness in ourselves, we experience unity. There's a great teacher in America called Locke Kelly, and he talks about it as it's the heart and mind thing, so that there's unconditional love, basically, unconditional loving awareness. And I think that's really something that people would understand as a concept, that Christ consciousness itself is something that just is here, in the same way that Richard Rohr talks about, the second coming has just always been happening. Like, it's not one day when it comes, it's actually each time it can come in another person.
Yes.
An awakened perspective. So I think that many of our regular people would be interested to come to the talk, and also interested in your work, your writings. I know our trustee James has read Blue Sky.
Blue Sky God,
and really enjoyed it. So do take a look at Don's website, and if you'd like to book on to the event, please do. There are plenty of spaces still available. Oh, and one more thing, it sort of reminded me as you were talking about Max Planck and people like that. I've been a few times near here's the Krishnamurti Center.
Oh, yeah.
And I've been a few times there, and they've got some great archive material of, is it David Bohm? Who
David Bohm,
who was very good friends with Krishnamurti, and he was a physicist, wasn't he? I think.
Yes, and thinking very much along the same sort of lines.
So that's fascinating. I think there are some good videos on YouTube actually of him dialoguing with, I think, also a psychologist in the 60s, I guess, or dialoguing with Krishnamurti. Really interesting stuff.
Yeah, because Krishnamurti was originally seen as being the Christ.
Yes, the new Messiah.
The new Messiah.
Which he kind of denounced at the minute they made him.
He totally denounced and emerged into his own right, really.
Yes. Well, that's great. Well, thanks, Don, so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
That's great. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you, Mark.
I think it'll be a lovely event. We do already have a good number of people already booked on, but as it's Zoom, we're not restricted too much by space. So if anybody's watching would like to come along and hear the presentation, please do book a ticket. And thanks again, Don. It's been lovely to talk to you and see you on the 12th.
Will do. Lovely.
Many thanks. Thanks, Don. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.